My name is Russell Mason, Vice President of AASPI and host for tonight. Okay, so to start off, I'd like to ask everyone to please keep their devices set to mute during the presentation. And if you have any questions during tonight's talk, please type them into the chat function of your Google Meet screen. And our moderator, Adrian Weir, will pose your questions during the talk. Well, tonight's speaker, we are excited to have Melbourne-based and Ukrainian-born Andrew Rovenko. The Rocket Girl Chronicles, Andrew's lockdown project, was born during Melbourne's sixth lockdown and found critical acclaim around the world with international coverage, including Vogue and Rolling Stone magazines. Andrew's also been recognised by the Australian Photography magazine, being awarded their highest honour of Australian Photography of the Year for 2021. Tonight's session is titled Documenting Backyard Space Travel One Walk at a Time. So here he is, all the way from Mission Control. It's over to you, Andrew and Adrian.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. It's a real privilege to have this chance to, present my work. So thank you for having me. And I'll just quickly share my presentation deck. All right. So I guess I'll go through a few things in this presentation. One would be who am I, my journey that got me here, and the project itself. So as you guys have heard, I was born in Ukraine, in the city of Odessa. It's a very beautiful place. I was very lucky to be born there. That's one of the landmarks. That's a very tall staircase that I used to take every day when I wanted to go to the beach there and back. And I guess it kept me fit as a child. I moved to Australia around 17 years ago. The accent is obviously still very strong because I speak Ukrainian in the family. And unfortunately, as you know, due to the recent events, my hometown looks a little bit the same as it used to look during the World War II. But fingers crossed, this thing will end quickly and everyone will be safe again. How it all started for me. A lot of people, I guess, get inspired by their parents or their contacts that showed them photography and introduced them to this. For me, it was slightly different. In my immediate family, there were no photographers. We didn't really have any cameras around the house. So the only exposure I had to this was through my grandfather. He used to have this 35mm half frame Seagull in translation, obviously Soviet made at the time. And for me as a kid, it was always just a complete mystery and a bit of a magic, just how he went and took photographs. He did development himself. Mini labs didn't really exist at the time, or were, I guess, very expensive. People used to develop everything at home, I guess, as many people here back in the day. So it's something that I didn't really experience as a child, but was always fascinated. And immediately, I guess, as I became old enough and I could, I guess, acquire my own camera, I did that. And this is how my photography journey started. So as a hobbyist, my work was seen, I guess my photographs were seen at one of the places I worked at as a 20-something-year-old. And the head of design there, he thought that my photography was just so good that it was even better than whatever professionals did for them. I think he was just being very kind, but he kind of gave me a bit of a launch pad into profession, because basically, I guess, if you can save money, if you don't want to hire a professional and there's someone in-house who can do a similar job, they would go down that path. So I don't think that I was any good, really. It was just, I guess, a matter of convenience for them. But this is how photography became part of my official job description at the time. But once you get something as your job description, you can take the next step. So that work then was seen by one of the partners. It was a local magazine that saw my work, and they invited me to work as a freelancer for them. And to be fair, this was probably the best practical school I could have ever had, because I don't think that any formal education can teach you, I guess, communication with people on the spot, when you get all these random assignments, when you don't really know where you need to go, where you have to go at any single day. Navigation didn't exist then, so I needed to find the place where assignment is located, figure out the lighting, figure out good angle. They were different from still life to interview photography to the event photography. So it was really, really, I guess, threw me down the deep end. I really stressed at the time because obviously being fairly new to the profession, it was extremely difficult to figure everything out, but it was a very good practical school. So even though I don't have any formal education or training, I did get, I guess, practical experience. Then I guess, flirted with commercial side of photography for a little bit because it's nice to be able to pay for your toys, for your equipment. So I did a bunch of advertising shoots. I did a bit of wedding photography. But what I found is that it's quite, I guess, difficult to keep enjoying something that you started out of, I guess, love for photography when you have to work towards a particular goal, when you have a very specific client demand that you have to fulfill, and your own creative vision is quite limited to those outputs. And if you kind of add high turnover and post-production and all of those things, it just becomes too much. So when it became too much of a job, I kind of scaled back my hobby to keep enjoying it just for myself and still find, I guess, a bit of positives in it. And lately I stuck mostly to film, I guess purely because it's slower and you feel more like a craftsman, I guess. And this image that I have here, that's a digital photograph. That's one of the, I guess, impromptu shots that we took. I think it was a Halloween around 7 years ago. And I just finished restoring this motorbike. And there was some kind of American association having a big Halloween party next to our street, on our street. And everyone dressed up and they had like this kind of massive thing. And I thought, you know what? I'm not doing anything. We might as well dress up. We dressed up, mingled around with people, and took this image in the garage just for fun. And yeah, it turned out as one of the good memories, I guess, at that time. All right, and I think this is almost my attempt at the ice breaking because I feel like I'm a bit of an imposter. Obviously, the group is called Association of Street Photographers, and my project is not really directly about street photography, even though it's a lot more impromptu than many people might think. So I did a bit of street photography as part of general attempts of exploring this endless field. And it was mostly related to the travel. As a bit of a younger person before I had a kid, we tried to explore a bit more of the world. And obviously, as you travel the world, that's the time when you keep your camera on you the most. And that's the time when you can observe the most moments. So these are just a few snapshots from what we saw. And I really actually enjoy street photography. I think it's one of the best pastimes, and I really hope that someday I'll be able to travel again and do it more. But this is one of the shots. I think we're walking on the streets of some Italian town, and there was a little cafe, and I couldn't really see inside of the cafe and couldn't see anything except for this lady obviously sitting inside the cafe. I couldn't see her head or anything, but the light was just dropping onto her from this angle that really kind of highlighted the posture. And I had, I think, some kind of a tele lens, and I took this image. And when you travel, you don't really have, I guess, a lot of time to assess what images you took. You kind of just take a shot and you deal with it later. And I still have some ridiculous amount of digital images that I took in my travels that I never even went through. But this is the one that I kind of saw immediately on the frame, and I saw, oh, this looks interesting. This looks nice, and I quite like it because it has this nice light and shade play. And obviously, being street photographers, you know, that decisive moment. There wasn't really a decisive moment itself, except of me walking down the street and coming to this particular spot when you just have this frame in front of you, and that's how it came about. And I think her holding a cigarette is kind of a bit of a nice touch. You can almost guess, I guess, what she is talking about and what she is doing in that cafe. This one was in Paris, if I remember correctly. So again, most of those shots are just from walks as you walk around the neighborhoods. And again, I saw this shop assistant talking to this elderly gentleman. And I think what's interesting in street photography is that some stories are very clear and easy to understand. Some stories offer you only a bit of a window into what's going on, but you don't really know what their conversation is about. And I think that's the beauty of the images, that you can have a bit of a prompt and you can just use your own imagination to try and figure out what this is about. So I still don't know what they spoke about. I guess gentleman asks some question and lady obviously listens to him very attentively, and everyone can have their own guess and try and kind of use their own mind and bring life into this image. And this is one, I guess, motive that I try to carry through a lot of my images now, is leave a bit of a space for imagination, for people to think about the frame itself or think about the story, because I think it's the most alive part of photography. If you give them the whole picture, it's just a nice image, but there's no, I guess, self-angle, self-thought onto it. This one, similar to the previous one, I saw this window and my question to myself was, who actually lives in this apartment building? You can obviously see the sheet music on the curtains, so I can only assume it's some kind of a musician. And those sneakers that are maybe drying, or maybe they just don't smell very good. I do not know, but I think there's something, again, a lot of food for thought, or some food for thought. It's a little bit playful, even though there's no human in the frame. You can almost imagine the person that is living in this apartment, and you can make stories about this person and why these sneakers are standing there. So, and I'll kind of keep the geometry and the technical aspect aside because it's almost a given. This one is more of a clear story. You can obviously see the person with a ladder is creating some street art or graffiti, and you can see some cans which are very nice and contrasty on this white background wall. And two people in the foreground, I'm not sure if they are together or if they are just observing or admiring the work, but I really love the geometrical feel about the image. You almost immediately get transformed into the frame, into the picture. There's no boundaries here. You're almost like immediately present in that space. And again, it was one of the images that when you see it even small in the previous screen of your camera, you can see that there's something in it. And that's why I included it here as well. This one is pretty much a classic. Obviously, a waiter from a restaurant is on a smoke or break. And it was, I think, the time when the smartphones were still not as much of a novelty, but they were still, I guess, making their way into the lives of people as being this permanent fixture. And at the time, you could almost see how this waiter, I guess, spends his smoke or break either absorbing the news or communicating with someone he knows. And again, you can imagine your own, imagine your own concept on what exactly he is consuming through his screen, and him standing there with a cigarette. I think it just tells all. And his pose with one leg against the wall, it's just that kind of classic look, which I thought looked very interesting. Not interesting, I guess, very typical or representative. This one was taken in Paris, I believe, as well. And what I found interesting here is that you have this beautiful architecture of the past century, very classic, traditional look. And this guy with his fixie bike, obviously relaxing in the sun, but his pose at the time, it looks almost like he could have been a bit of a medieval sculpture from a different time and era. So when I saw this frame, I thought that's kind of almost interesting. You almost blend two different periods of time, and with the bicycle and him being very modern, at this particular point in time, in this setting, he looked almost like a sculpture. So that's how this image came about. This is from India, and just the geometry and the kind of dead space of the concrete wall, all those steps, they almost make the line that's kind of very harmonious and plays very well with that white wall. And one sign of life here is just that little pot with a plant. And obviously the lady having her rest with the bag. I think it's almost, I guess, a bit of a poetic image that the composition itself, it was almost perfect. So when I walked past, I just couldn't help but take this shot. And you can guess once again whether she's waiting for someone to come and pick her up, or whether she's waiting for just to get some rest and continue her journey. But yeah, it's a bit of a one that I keep looking at and still like, even though I saw it many times. This one is out of Nepal, and what was very interesting for me in this particular place is that they sweep their floors on the marketplace every morning, and it's extremely dusty, I guess, floor. Maybe, I'm not sure, from the soil or from what. And there's no wind there. It's very kind of still air. So those clouds of dust, they go, and every morning as you go out, they literally rise in the air. And if you shoot against the light, they make this kind of almost smoky, magical feel when the sun is low after the sunrise. And this lady, she's selling some groceries, obviously, or some herbs, and she's covering her nose with her scarf from the dust, but her appearance is quite, I guess, somber and serious. And yeah, apologies for the noise. I got some hoons out on St. Kilda Road right now. So yeah, that's just the lighting, and the environment was just amazing there. And that's the last one from my street series. This one is again from Nepal, and you couldn't really find a better representation of the phrase "head in the clouds." So this gentleman obviously just had a bit of a pull of a cigarette, and as I mentioned, with the absence of any wind, all that, I guess, smoke that he breathed out, it kept hanging above his head. And when I saw it, I just couldn't really believe that it could be real. And it highlighted by that incoming sun, it really made it a bit special and magical. So yeah, that's the head in the clouds. So obviously, my street photography is not of the caliber of people who do it seriously, but I just wanted to maybe kind of try make an impression that I'm not a total imposter, and please don't judge me too harshly. Thank you. And did you guys have any questions so far?
So far, Andrew, Ananda has asked, going right back to your photo of the motorbike, actually, he just asked about how you got the whiff of smoke on the exhaust. He thinks it looks so cool.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so the whiff of smoke is, I just literally put the throttle, and this being an old bike, they do get quite a bit of smoke because obviously there's no filtering, but the bike itself was actually standing on the center stand. So I wasn't moving, it wasn't rolling for obvious reasons. And the center stand was photoshopped out. And this was my film photography days where I guess a little manipulation that helps the impression I found acceptable. But yeah, that was how it was made. All right, the next one. So this was my previous life. Then I had a child, and I guess as every parent knows, once you have a child, it changes your life forever. And this happened to my life as well. So for a while, I didn't really photograph much, and I was really, I guess, busy figuring out how to be a parent. And then the pandemic happened. So with all of us locked down, or many of us locked down, I had to find some outlets, and photography being a long-time passion came back. And this combined with me photographing my child, I guess, really come back in a big way, because I needed to learn. I needed to kind of grow. I didn't really want to repeat something that I already knew and something that I've already done. So I bought a large format camera, and I think everyone made an impulse purchase during the pandemic. And my impulse purchase was, this is not my camera in particular, but it's the same camera that I purchased. It was Birkin James 4x5. And it honestly was the biggest source of learnings about the photography as a whole, because I never really kind of had such an in-depth understanding of how light works and what happens when you capture that light. And I went a little bit too deep, being a bit of a DIY person. So this was my setup about a year ago. So the beautiful thing about large format photography is that it's extremely hackable. So you can do almost anything with it. It's literally just two planes, your lens plane and your film plane. You can put on any lens. So you can basically just take anything with a glass you can put on, and you can shoot on anything as well. So this photograph of my daughter on the right, it's taken on the Fujifilm Instax wide film that I basically just attached to a standard 4x5 film holder, just hold blank sheet. And that lens is a projection lens. I believe it's maybe over 100 years old. And what you see in the front is something I kept myself busy with as I tried to figure out how to shoot onto something that doesn't have a shutter, because obviously projection lenses don't have any shutters. 4x5 is a DIY heaven. And what you can see here is my little contraption that I made out of, thank you, Bunnings Plumbing Aisle, by the way, that little thing that you can see with the circle in between. I think it's some kind of a pipe extender that fitted the lens at the time, a toothpick, and this is just a little holder that's cut out, little dark slide that's cut out of the notepad that you can probably recognize, and a bit of a slide. And I'll just quickly show you the operational principle of this. So toothpick, pull, and that's your shutter. So that's kind of something I had to resort to, going a little bit crazy and figuring out how to how to shoot different things and lenses. And I had to also figure out how to measure the speeds. And you wouldn't believe, but those gravity pulled shutters are extremely reliable in terms of speed. So this shutter was made to 1/70th, and I literally did 2 attempts or number of attempts, and they're accurate to the point of 0.02 second if you got your, I guess, angle right. And I had to make this little shutter tester to figure things out. Going next step crazy, I purchased this camera just for its lens. So it's an aircraft f/24 camera that you can still get from time to time on eBay, and it's extremely awkward, and it's very hard to make a shutter for it. So I had to buy another large format camera that had proper focal plane shutter, so you don't have to attach anything or create anything for the lens itself, but you can use just this one and adapt that lens for it. And as you can see on the left-hand side, it has that flash unit, and it's something that I found by accident. This flash unit isn't really usable. You can't really find the batteries or the light bulbs for it anymore. But this flash unit was used in the Star Wars movie as a prop for both lightsabers. So for Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader lightsabers, they used 2 slightly different Graflex flash units as for their prop department. They're not exactly the same. They were modded slightly by the prop department, but that's the source. And they're, strangely enough, highly sought after these days, which I had no idea about. And this kind of, the reason why I did it, it gave me a look for the photographs that really came from another century. So when you kind of take pictures like this, those lenses, they see the world the same way as lenses saw the world 100 or 150 years ago. And for me, it was really fascinating that I was able to replicate that look that came from completely different era. But what I also found, unfortunately, is that when you have a child and you need to take a shot while you're fiddling with all these custom shutters and all those things, it's almost impossible to keep her in focus, because any very, very small movement in the focal plane on the large format, especially if you shoot wide open, like the focal plane is so small, so narrow, that tiny movement would put her out of focus. So I needed something, I guess, in between. And for taking pictures of my daughter, I started using medium format Mamiya camera, and I'm using large format for slightly different. But what large format really did for me, it changed my approach completely to how I shoot. I really kind of started thinking about everything. And I started, I guess, thinking about direction of light, what's in the frame, what's out of the frame, what to say. It wasn't as much of trying to capture the moment. It was more about finding the moment. So it's I guess, paradigm shift for me. And with the cost, obviously, of the film, you have to think. You cannot really keep shooting, especially on the large format. You get 2 shots per holder, and that's it. So if you screw that up, you haven't got anything to bring back home, which is great. And now the film. So I found this particular film, which is unfortunately was discontinued, I think, in the beginning of the last year. So I'm shooting the last stock of this film. And the reason why I think film is so much different than digital is that you get completely different processing. This is not my image. I stole it from the internet, but it just demonstrates how under and overexposure translates to the image on this particular type of film. So if you overexpose something with digital by 6 steps, everything will blow out. Like, you will have nothing in the highlights. There's nothing to rescue. It's like, even though on the cameras with a huge dynamic range, you can play with the RAW and bring something back. This particular film, if you overexpose it, it still preserves all of the highlights, but your shadows just get very different appearance, as you can see in this example. And when I kind of experimented with this film and play around with different lighting conditions, it just kept blowing my mind how different almost angle of light affects your image differently to get very different effects. And I still have a few packs in my fridge, and when I run out of them, I will be pretty devastated, because just when I figured out how to shoot this particular stock, it had to be, I guess, discontinued. So it's a shame, but it also makes things a lot more valuable for me, because every shot that you take knowing that this film will never be produced again, it just adds so much more value, and you have to really kind of treasure what you do. All right, so finally, the project that somehow randomly propelled me in a very unexpected spotlight is the Rocket Girl Chronicles. So this came about from the same situation with the lockdown. As you saw, I used my spare time to experiment with photography, but it only gets you as far. And this project started in the 6th lockdown, when my 4-year-old child got extremely bored being stuck at home. It was the time when the playgrounds were closed. You couldn't really go anywhere further than your 5K radius, as you all know, and you had 2 hours of, I guess, exercise time. So we kind of really tried to figure out what would be the way to give her something that she could talk about after she comes back from her walk, and make her daily walks feel like it's something special. It's an adventure. Make her look at the world in a different way. And my daughter was always fascinated by space, always fascinated by kind of stars, and she asks questions nonstop. So with my wife being a theater costume designer, she made this costume for her and a space helmet. And we kind of just started walking around our neighborhood and trying to kind of create stories of what could be your space adventure. And it didn't supposed to be a photography project, to be honest. Like this is almost a happy accident, because I kept my camera with me or on me, and kind of as we were walking, I would take some shots here and there, because it was looking very interesting and surreal. And I didn't even develop them at the time. I had a few rolls kind of that I shot one after another. And when I got to developing them, they just looked so surreal and so, I guess, mixed with this world and another world, that it became a photography project. And interestingly, she still enjoys these walks. So this was being a dad, I'm trying to make puns every now and again. So I don't know if people can relate. With English being obviously my second language, they're very poor. So this one is called So Near So Far, or Sofa. I think it was a hard, rubbish day in the neighborhood as we walked there. And she got, I think, a little bit tired, or she just saw this sofa being put out of this house, and she just sat on it. And I promise, I checked, it was very clean. There was no danger of catching up any infectious diseases, or so I think. Nobody really knows. But yeah, she kind of took a bit of a rest in this spot. And when I saw this kind of her sitting there with this classic suburban house in the background, and those power lines almost being synchronized, I took the shot, and it just looks, I think, quintessentially suburban, with color palette almost, I guess, color coordinated. Like I couldn't really ask for a better color scheme. As you can see, the flowers on that plant are almost the same shade of magenta as the pattern on the sofa. And that lush green lawn that is in the foreground a little bit, it's one of the characteristics of this particular film stock. It produces very, very rich greens in certain conditions. And that's, I guess, another bit of magic that I discovered with different types of film, is that with different, they all have different combinations of different emulsions with different sensitivity to red, green, and light. And this subtle combination almost makes every stock very unique in how they see the world. So they might see something that human eye might not even see, or just kind of perceive the surroundings in a different place. And I probably wasted 10 rolls at least trying to figure out how this stock sees the world until I kind of got a bit of a grasp on it. This one is called the board, and we went to a laundry, and this kind of stacked row of washing machines, with that stainless polished steel, it looks almost like a spaceship. And while she was waiting, I took a picture of her standing next to those washing machines, and it literally looked like an interior of a spaceship with the portholes and those green lights being almost like instruments or some, I guess, indicators that looked really interesting. And yeah, I think having a little astronaut in different settings, it really transforms your perception of the world. And we just kind of play, obviously, whatever comes to our mind. And if it's a spaceship, we would try and play spaceship game or ask questions about this and that, which was great. And this one, again, another walk in the neighborhood. It's a place where I believe they fix taxis, some kind of a mechanical yard, and there was no one there on the weekend, and there were these barrels standing there. And I didn't really expect to get this shot because she asked me to climb on the barrel, and I helped her out, obviously. And I was trying to fiddle and kind of catch the frame to take a picture of her on the barrel. And suddenly she made this gesture as if she's taking off. And luckily I had everything set up. I pulled the shutter. And one interesting thing about film, which still kind of fascinates me, you never really know whether you got the shot or not, whether she blinked or whether she moved. So like, until you go and develop your role, you don't really know what loot you might come back with. And that's something that really keeps me, I guess, interested in what I do, because I cannot really go and reshoot and retake, because this moment, and this is in a way what maybe gets it a little bit closer in feeling to street photography in a way, because in the street photography, that moment comes only once, if you're lucky. So you kind of have to capture, be in the right spot at the right time, take a picture, and if you're lucky, you got it. With a film, it's a little bit similar. Like you can go and take and retake, and with some shots, I did many attempts, but with many shots, it's, especially when you have a small child, it's not like you can really pose or model someone who is 4-year-old. So, and that's one of the most asked questions when people see my social media. They're like, oh, I wish my child was so, I guess, so adaptable to photography, or so, I guess, so calm and quiet and just pose for me. But they really don't know how lucky I am to be able to take this, because yeah, it's never, if anyone had 4-year-old, they know, everyone knows that they never stand still. So yeah, hopefully people can relate. This was taken next to the neighborhood. That was winter last year when it was getting dark very early. So we went out for a walk. It was still daylight, and as we were planning to come back, it was very dark. And I almost didn't think that I'll be able to take anything in these conditions. That film is 400 ISO. And I thought I'll just make a bit of an experiment. And she obviously was attracted by these bright neon lights and just pink letters. So she went to check out the letters. And yeah, it came out really interesting with that kind of classic neon look from the window just in the neighborhood. And that one is in Hyatt, for people from Melbourne who is familiar. There's an old gasworks factory there that I think it's being redeveloped now, but no one really did anything with that spot for a while, so it got a bit overgrown with weeds, and we went just to kind of walk around the big empty space. And we found a chair, and she obviously climbed onto it as child finding a standalone object would. And this, she gave me plenty of time because she kind of was just sitting there on her little throne. And it kind of struck to me later that this image is very similar, I guess, to the Little Prince in the concept. She has this kind of her throne. She's a bit of a little princess in this kingdom of hers, because there's just us, there's nobody else around. And obviously with the Little Prince being a bit of a space traveler himself, it only kind of struck me later, the resemblance of this shot. But at the time, I just saw this beautiful magical light in the evening. And as you can see, with the medium format, the rendering of the depth of field is something that is very hard to achieve on 35mm or full frame, and even harder to achieve on the cropped sensor if you shoot digital, because the depth of field for the same focal distance is completely different. And in large format, it's even more so. And with the medium format, I found this kind of I feel almost like cheating, I guess, shooting in the medium format, because I do have a reliable shutter. I can actually set shutter speed and know the exposure that I'll get. There's no inbuilt light meter, so I have to kind of either use my phone or either use external light meter. But it's something that really kind of makes you think a little bit more about the lighting of your scene as well. And this was a little bit later, that's the same evening. Some kids in that same spot, I think they built themselves a little mountain bike track, because there was kind of tiny little hill, and I think they brought some groceries in this old shopping trolley. And as every kid, Mia wanted to climb in and asked me to kind of roll her around and kind of help her out. So we had lots of fun. I got very tired. It's a very bumpy ride. I think those shopping trolleys aren't really great even on the paved road, and on this kind of surface they're terrible. But I guess the bumpier, the better for the kids. So that was a lot of fun. And then the sun was setting, and she just sat there and looked at the sunset. And I took the shot, and I think I missed the focus a little bit. But what I found as well is that sometimes the story or what you want to convey and what you see in the picture is more important than the technical aspects, because I used to be the kind of really pixel peeping nerd trying to get the focus perfectly every time. And this experience really allowed me to relax and really not think about those kind of things I used to obsess about too much. And just because when you do something for yourself as well, as long as you know that you captured the memory of your adventure, of your outing, that's all you really need, because your child doesn't need to know that everything is perfectly in focus. And as I said, this project wasn't really supposed to be seen by anyone else. It was just our family memories. So it kind of, I untied my hands and allowed me to kind of shoot a lot more freely, which was great. And that's in the local park. We found this big stump. I think there used to be a big tree someday, and it's actually quite a busy park. And there was just one angle that I saw with this building in the background that looked almost a little bit alien, and you could see, or not alien, futuristic, I guess, even though it's just a residential tower, residential building. And this kind of showed me as well that if you have the right angle and just really position yourself in the right spot, it can transform the perception of the environment completely. And when your child looks at those scenes as well, she doesn't pay attention to things that adults do. And that almost makes you think differently and see the world differently, almost more like a child, because you can isolate your play world or your imaginative world from the real world. And I think that's part of the magic of photography, because you kind of can show what you see. You can provide people window into your world. And yeah, this is the hangar. We found just this old shed, and somehow, I don't know, there's something with old sheds and space. I don't know what it is. I cannot pinpoint it. Maybe there was a movie, maybe there was something else. But when I saw this kind of big old shed, I thought there's something alien about it. And again, we were just kind of walking around in this field, having a bit of fun. I took the shot, and yeah, somehow in my mind, it talks to me, aliens. Maybe there's some spaceship hidden inside, maybe not, but that's kind of that window for imagination that we can all use ourselves. This is next to the Moorabbin Airport Museum. So I went to the museum with her before the pandemic when she was very little, and she barely remembered anything there, and she really wanted to come back. With everything closed, I thought, you know what, I'll at least get her closer to the museum, and she'll get a bit of an experience just to look at the planes. And she kind of went around and kind of went next to the fence, obviously unable to go inside. And as the sun was setting, it was quite a beautiful sunset through the pink clouds. She turned around to look at it. I took this shot, and it almost tells that she is, I guess, waiting for this place to open so that she can visit or she could take off to the sky. And I found this poetic explanation for myself. And luckily, after the pandemic, the museum has opened, and that is the inside of that exact plane. The staff at the Moorabbin Airport Museum, they saw the previous image, and they have very kindly invited us to visit, which we did. And this image was taken there when she actually came and got onto this plane. And yeah, again, she just looks out. It looks a bit like a spaceship, I think, even though it's just an old airplane. And the natural light from the window really makes some kind of cinematic effect. And that shallow depth of field, again, just looks quite magical for me personally. All of the images are taken in the natural light. I never have any external light, or I haven't had external lighting with me so far. And that's another challenge, kind of how can you use what is available in the scene to your best possible, I guess, outcome. And that's similar location. We were actually, I think it was the same night when we took an image of the shed. We just kind of made a big circle around, and as we were coming back, because sun goes down so quickly in winter, as we were returning back, it was already dark, and we saw this big shed being lit up, and it looked literally like an alien facility or some kind of a strange facility out of the sci-fi movie. And I kind of moved away, took a picture while she was standing a little bit in the spotlight, and it gave it's like really alien surreal feel. And as you can see, there's a little white line of me not cropping things too well from scan, so I'll probably need to stamp out on the left. This is a funny image in a way of generally I receive quite a positive feedback on socials. With this image, somebody commented about me being extremely unsafe on the train tracks, around the train tracks, which was interesting because this image was taken. These are not actually train tracks. This is a normal suburban tram that goes, I believe, from Port Melbourne to maybe towards the city. I don't really know, but there's just a little crossing, and she stands probably 1 meter away from that crossing. and you can obviously see there's no trams in sight, but the matter of perspective, and I think it really tells how photography can sometimes really make people think something else or take their imagination. That person was 100% certain that it's some kind of a high-speed train and my child is standing next to in a very unsafe location at the time. But yeah, this was something I call the city line. When the sun goes down, that kind of skyline gets really highlighted beautifully in the glass windows of the CBD. And as we were there, I really couldn't help but take that shot, and I think it came out interesting. Again, you can think whether she is traveling somewhere, where do these tracks lead, what is out there in this big place. And yeah, that one is a bit of a, again, lucky accident in a way. It's called emergency slide. Obviously, again, space theme. She wanted to go on this playground as every child slide down the slide. And as you can see, the entrance or the kind of the beginning of the slide up there, it's almost like a window into the sky or a doorway into the sky. And you could think, is it some kind of spaceship that is invisible or cloaked, or whether it's literally, I guess, staircase to heaven in a way? So you can take, again, your imagination. But for me, I think, again, the way the film rendered these colors and that soft light is very special. And I didn't think that anything good will come out of that frame or that shot, but sometimes you get those really unexpected, I guess, keepers, and that's one of them. I'll probably start going quicker because there's only 7 minutes left for the hour, and you guys are busy. I'll just quickly go through. So this is the shot from Brighton, and again, the sun reflected in this window really beautifully, and you could almost see the swirl of the bouquet with the foreground from these bushes in the front, which I thought really made really amazing, I guess, effect. And the color palette, literally everything is that kind of lead gray with two highlights, her face and sun reflecting in the window. It just really kind of two visual accents that perfectly stood in those thirds of the frame and made this frame quite nice. Twilight, sorry that I put the wrong title. It's called The Twilight Flight. So she went out to look at the windsurfers, or kite surfers rather, and kind of stood there observing. And that setting sun and color scheme really made it look a little bit surreal, a little bit, I guess, from another planet. And again, as every father, you kind of try to entertain your child in a different way. And this is the first time we had a campfire ever, because pandemic started when she was only 2, and she grew and grew throughout the pandemic, and you couldn't really go out too much. So I thought, you know what, I'll just take some. I kind of had actually matches in the car. And when we went to the beach, there was this little place for the campfire and some firewood. So that was a perfect timing. So we kind of made it, and she just sat there observing the flames while I was taking the picture. And yeah, it kind of was one of those very quiet, windless nights. And for me personally, I remember each of those adventures and occasions so much better than most of the frames that I took when I was traveling with digital, because I don't know, something is different when you take analog images, and you kind of, because you think about them so much more, they stay with you a lot better as memories. And then I think that's why I think it's a nice tool to be able to, I guess, embed those memories into your own brain as well. This is the Mirror Planet. This is in St. Kilda. I think it was low tide, and yeah, she just went exploring around the sandbanks, and yeah, got our shoes wet. again, one of the things to remember from that shot. And again, the color scheme was just impossible to miss, so I had to take it. Found a basketball court, and again, the colors just played together very well. This is the most difficult shot on, okay, not the difficult, this is the most repeated shot I ever took. I'm a bit of a phone booth aficionado, if you may, being, I guess, coming from an older generation slightly. I still remember phone booths being those magical communication devices when you can call anyone, you can call your mom, talk to anyone, mobiles went around, so I still love phone booths. And I think every one of them is a bit of a portal into another world. You can connect, and we went around and we played in many phone booths, because every time child sees something with buttons and has this, she would want and go and press them. And I took quite a few shots of different phone booths, but this is the one that I think just came out perfectly. I wanted to call it Call Home, but for the obvious association, but it was too obvious, so I named it Long Distance Call. And the nature almost played to the color scheme of the Telstar colors, with that slightly orangey sunset, giving me that beautiful orangey backdrop. So yeah, I really enjoy the shot. And I drove, this phone booth is on the way to work for me. I drove past it a billion times. I never thought it was anything picturesque or worthy of photographing, but yeah, it came out quite nicely. Port Melbourne, I think, yeah, just a bit of an alien city that looks very, very different, another different planet, with all those shipping containers in the background. This is the first time she stood on the floating dock. Yeah, it was a bit of a happy accident. Again, we found a way with everything closed. You could access this fuel station somehow. I guess normal when things are open. Maybe there's some security. Somehow this floating dock was accessible, so we went around to look at it. I took this image, and I ran out of film at the time, and it's something that's kind of gets left behind the frame. Literally, I think 2 minutes after this shot, a massive container ship went past us, and that kind of created this huge wave that elevated this floating dock with us. So it was quite interesting experience. No wet shoes this time around, but yeah, it was like she really enjoyed kind of, it was almost like on a swing, just kind of catching this huge wave and just this massive ship going next to us. It was just surreal. And that was taken on the same night, just looking across the Yarra on the other shore. And you never know, it almost looked like an alien spaceport or a factory or something like that. And she stood there. I was packing up my camera. I wasn't planning to take any more shots. She just went to look at the lights, and I thought, you know what, I'll just take one more, and that's what came out. And if you remember, there were these little isolation circles in the parks, and one night we came to the gardens and we saw those isolation circles, and after a lot of riding around, she kind of stood there in the middle. And this just your classic, I guess, shot of being beamed in or out. Yeah, I didn't really think about the lighting. It looks quite boring in terms of your classic color schemes, very magenta, but I think in this particular shot it really works well. So, and that's why I kind of love film, because you can take almost any shot is consistent. It's very hard to get something that's too random with a film just because the way it sees the light. It's 9 o'clock. I still have a few more frames to go. Is it okay if I stay a bit longer, or?
Keep on going, Andrew. Keep on going. Thank you.
All right. I'll try to be quick. Thanks, guys. Thanks for the time. This is another place. I rode past it a billion times on my push bike on the way to work. It was one of the cafes closed. I think it was Elwood Beach. It's Elwood Beach Rotunda, actually. So, and yeah, we went there. It was one of those cold, boring days. And she climbed onto the table. She kind of likes to climb on things, and you can imagine. I think most children do. And I just took this one shot of this one umbrella, and yeah, it kind of aligned with the horizon and the color scheme. It's really kind of makes you think, what is she waiting for? Just the lines. Like this one, we were driving past this, and I saw those lines just going kind of in front of me as we were driving past, and that was intentional. So that wasn't a walk. I see the shot. I have to stop here. We stopped, and we found this little toy car laying next to it. This one is probably the most posed out of a lot of them, because she is not really, I guess, compliant child in a way, to just kind of sticking to one spot. So I kind of asked her, can you please stand to this card? Because one step to the left and to the right, you really lose the geometry, and those pillars kind of don't work anymore, like as from the smaller to bigger one. So, but yeah, again, this time around, I think it came out all right. This is another shot from Port Melbourne. As you can see, our geography increased slightly as lockdown was ending. So we're quite lucky, I guess, to have so many amazing places to be found. But they're all in Metro Melbourne. We never went really kind of out there too outrageously. And again, one of the comments on my social was, it would be so much better if she was just standing there on her toes and looking into the binoculars. And I think maybe, but with this child, I don't really try to take images of, I guess, what I want her to do. She found those binoculars, and that's how she decided to stand and look, and that's what it is. So I guess it's important to stay true to yourself and why you started this project, rather than try and chase your goal of a perfect image. Because I think if you try to start kind of deviating from it and kind of playing too much to the audience or to what you think is good, it wouldn't be the original reason. And with this being a family project, I think the original reason is always more important. And yeah, this is just, I don't know, a bit of a sad and nostalgic shot in a way. She wasn't sad there at all, but I think with Princess Pia, obviously everyone taking those little pillars as a main focus of their shot in the frame, or the sunset. For me, I guess my child is always more important. So pillars in the background, they're great background. But yeah, it's just her, again, looking at the sunset. And as you can see, most of the time, it's after hours, because I would finish my work and then I'll be able to go out with her. So that's kind of the reason. And also Twilight lighting, it's just beautiful with this film. This is called Off Deck, or the Freedom Day. So this was the day when I think we announced late October that Victoria goes out of the 6th lockdown. It was gradual, I guess, gradual easing of the restrictions, but this is the only image where I have other people, because it's Freedom Day and people are allowed. So, and again, the color scheme, you just couldn't have asked for nature to give you the better backdrop for the skate ramp colors. So I really enjoyed being there at this place at this time. And again, this I feel gets me a little bit closer to the street photography in concept, because when you go out on a walk, you cannot really plan too much of a setup shoot. You cannot really plan that lighting. You have to almost like, you go to capture memories and you try to make your best to capture them, but you cannot really make environment better for you or weather better for you. So you just kind of play to both. This one is called the Green Line. We just found this bus parked on one of the side streets in Moorabbin. And yeah, I saw those lines and I had to stop. And she obviously loved playing with old buses. And the more we shoot, the more of a story I can see kind of coming together, and I'll kind of continue. You'll see what I mean. So we saw this bus, but I had an earlier shot that we took in this old Com-Air, I believe. They used to be I think, Melbourne-made buses. And we kind of hid in this bus. It was a pouring rain. Maybe you can see some of the trails from the rain out on the windows. And she was just waiting there. She didn't actually want to play in this bus anymore. She wanted to go out, but we had to wait because it was raining so much. And I took the shot while we were waiting. And it came to be, I guess, the most beautiful color palette, because that kind of lighting, soft lighting from the rainy day, reflecting from the interior of the bus, gave it really kind of gray cast. And I don't really process my images extensively, except for minor corrections, because every time I start doing that, I feel like I'm losing something that film gave me. So I would generally correct for obvious mistakes, some minor overexposure, but or I guess color tinting, because I process the film myself, and I'm sometimes don't stick to the process, and I get too much of a magenta tint, and I will compensate for it. So in this case, it just came out perfectly with the colors. And yeah, I'm really stoked with this image, because it just, you can really think and imagine what is in her mind as she travels on this bus. And yeah, it's really kind of gives you a lot of food for thought. And strangely enough, we found exactly the same bus in another location in a very different shape. So I call it the other shuttle. And it's so strange that you can find two old buses in Melbourne, and it just shows that if you look a little bit more, I guess, intently into your own neighborhood, you can find amazing things there. This is the paintball court, which was accessible. Strangely, I think it was maybe because of the pandemic as well. I'm not really sure, but you could kind of walk on the trail from one footy oval, and we just took this trail to figure out where it leads, and it led to this paintball court. And it was just surreal. It just looked so strange that, yeah, I really couldn't help but take this image. This is called the wildflowers. She found those wildflowers, and you can see the old airplane in the background and a bit of a radio tower. And it kind of just connects to the whole space theme. But for her, the main thing was the flowers, because me being, I guess, a guy, old airplane parked on the grass, very exciting. She couldn't care less. So yeah, you never know. And this is another, I guess, continuation. So this was a rainy day. We saw this beautiful beetle, and I'm obviously, again, being slightly older person, I'm very nostalgic about old beetles, because I remember them from my childhood. And I took this image because I thought that color, and again, it was raining, it looks a little bit shiny, just very magical. And then we came across the yard where the guy who restores beetles had amazing collection of them, and I really kind of couldn't help but take a picture of her there. So as you can see, like, you find those connections, and you find the story that almost writes itself the more you travel. Found an old sofa. This is more of, I guess, my learning about this film. In particular situation, it really gives you green/yellow tint. And if you, I found that when the sun comes at slight angle, when you shoot almost against the sun, but not purely against the sun, you get completely different feel from the shot. And the more you observe, the more you learn about it. And this is very magenta, very kind of straight light plus bricks, and the wall obviously gives those magenta reflections. But the next shot, again, this on purpose, I try to simulate the same conditions as I saw with that shot, because I wasn't sure if I screwed up something with the development that gave me this greenish look, or whether that's how film really works. So I tried, when we came and found this place, I tried to get exactly the same angle of the sun getting into the camera. And as you can see, that's the field. That's what really gave it that look. I'm almost done. This is the post New Year. So as I said, something like adventures, they never really get boring for children. And even though the costume itself, I think she would have got bored of very quickly. Her knowing that every time we go somewhere, if she wants to go and kind of explore new places, she can put on that costume and I will get her somewhere and we'll go on some kind of a mission. Sometimes she asks me to go to the same places. Sometimes she wants, like, Daddy, can we go and find some new adventure? So we've just found this old Christmas tree, and I think the aftermath is quite, I guess, fitting, because as you know, after Christmas you can find plenty of them in the suburban area, but somehow this Christmas tree made it into this empty block somewhere in Port Melbourne. And I thought it was very strange because it's nowhere near the residential houses, so somebody really took an effort to bring it there. Finally, this is called the Trident. This is a recent image. The symbol of my home country, Ukraine, is the Trident. And it was taken at the time when people kept guessing whether it will be attacked or not. And this being almost, I guess, a crossroad for the world. And the Trident, I kind of saw it as being a bit symbolic. And it was just a bit of a pastime. We waited for dinner to be ready, and we kind of just were killing time. So I took this image, but I think it came out quite well. And finally, better days. So it's, again, everyone can think, I guess, the beauty of it, everyone can think of their own interpretation. But yeah, it was taken at better days, and friendship is still possible. And again, it's in the local area. I'll leave it to you, for you guys to decide what this one means. And this one is actually from one of the first rolls. So it's called Homecoming, even though it was one of the first images that we took. It was just next to our area. There's this beautiful car parked next to that house, and somehow I think it's reminiscent of that 50s era or 60s era when the space race and like achievements in space were really kind of on the radar of the humankind. And that's kind of how I can see a connection to this. So thanks again, and apologies for going over time. I didn't really expect to be so, yes. So
not a problem at all, Andrew. Some of the feedback coming through in the chat is, I think everyone's really pleased that you went over time and, shared more with us. Susan, our president, says, fabulous series, Andrew, and thanks so much for sharing your fabulous work. Stephen Walters goes again, thank you, Andrew. Very imaginative and creative series. I'm sure a superb opportunity for father and daughter bonding as well. Now, we've got a couple of questions in there as well, Andrew, so we'll go with them. And from Ananda, he asks, what would be the equivalent focal length of the lens?
That is 127. That's a good question. I actually need to look it up, what it converts to in 35 mil, because it's either, I think it's, give me a sec. So it's, give me a second. I will tell you. So 110 medium format, 35 mil equivalent. That would be
64 mil.
Yes, 60 something. So 100 mil is 62. So it would be something around 70 mil, I think.
Awesome, thanks for that. And Emma says that a number of those images are very X-File-ish, which I tend to agree with as well there. Now, a question from Susan, which, again, I was going to actually ask a similar question, is do you have a favourite photo from the series? And if so, which one and why?
It's very hard because it's very hard to tell. I know what I guess the favorites are on socials, but it's almost a bit of a lottery in a way, what gets picked up. For me personally, I think I get the most excited by my latest role. So whatever I have the latest being developed, because I haven't seen it yet, I don't know what will come out. So I get the most excited by what I will see next. Sometimes I get disappointed, as each and everyone, but I think I could have had something good and it just isn't what it is. And sometimes I get really, I guess, excited from unexpected surprises, something that I really didn't expect will come out any good. I think it's more of the themes. It's hard, very hard, because for me, they're not images, they're memories. So I think whatever walk was special for us, whenever we had the best time, that's the best image.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, if you know what I mean.
And that leads into like Jen Fawkes's comment here. Jen says, what a fabulous series. What a lucky little girl to have a dad like you, and what beautiful memories.
Oh, thank you so much.
So that's great. And Ganda, so what does your daughter think of it all, and how it's, gained a lot of exposure and fame?
She couldn't care less. She couldn't care less, honestly. Like she is oblivious, I guess, to the effect, which is maybe is a blessing. I think it's probably good, because when she knows, because some people actually send things and say nice things, which I convey to her. So I think for her, it was very much of a learning of an outer world, that there are different countries, there are people from different countries. And I think it gives me an opportunity to talk to her about how her experiences were perceived by others, because I obviously tell her, somebody from such and such country told this, which is very nice. And she's like, what is this country? Where is it? And I get a chance to educate her a little bit more about the world. So I think that's the extent to which it goes. But fame for her is not really a concept.
Wait till she's a teenager and hates looking back at the photos.
Yeah, I'm dreading that day, honestly. And I reckon I'll be that idiot father that, how could you do something like that?
So if there's no more questions, I'll hand it back over to Russell.
Thank you very much, Adrian. And thank you very much, Andrew, for a fantastic presentation. That was a brilliant way to spend lockdown. You did talk about compliance too, though. Sometimes if your daughter was getting sidetracked, what bribes did you have to come out with?
She loves ice cream. So ice cream is always a good one. But I think in the moment in time, you cannot really, I think that's, for me, it was as much of a learning about children as about photography, because in the moment, you cannot really bribe them for the future. If I don't have an ice cream now, it doesn't work. So I guess it's more like expectation management rather. So I think if she knows, I guess, or it's more like, I guess, playing to her interests. It's not about me posing her, but me observing what she does and trying to make it work, to capture that memory in the best possible way. So I think that's what it is. I didn't really think about it before, so thanks for that question. Because children, they're extremely hard to make genuinely compliant. And if you make them compliant because you want to make them compliant, you lose genuity, I guess. You don't have a memory anymore. You have a post image. So for me, I want to take the best possible shot, but she does her own thing. How can I find the angle, find the approach to take her in her element, but take the shot in the best possible way? So that's how it works. It's kind of both ways.
Very good. No, you can tell they're really genuine photos. It didn't look like you were like had an issue with that at all. When you mentioned it, I just thought, oh, that was unusual, but no, they're great. Just another technical question. What was the helmet made from? Is that standard issue like NASA paper mache or?
Standard issue papier mache. So yeah, it's an inflatable beach ball, and that's not mine. I cannot claim it. It's my wife's amazing craft skills. So it's an inflated beach ball, and strips of the newspaper just glued over it. Then you deflate the ball. The only thing is that little trim against the opening for the face. It came from my motorcycle project. That's my contribution.
Fantastic. And I'd like to say, I also love 645 cameras. I love the format. I think it works really well. Your Instagram feed looks fantastic too. And I don't know, the way that you frame things, it's almost set up for a 6x6 or something like that. But the 645, when you click on it, you just get that little bit more that's, that's hiding there. It just really works.
This one is actually 6x7, interestingly, because
okay.
Yeah, I wish I had 6x4, 6x4 by half and half, because it would have given me more frames. But 6x7 only gives me 10.
Yeah.
So my film doesn't go as far, and it's a monster of a camera. So this one is my Mia RZ67, which isn't really designed to be used out in the field as much. It's a studio camera, really. But after the large format, going back to the studio camera with the real shutter, it's nothing. You're like, it's easy.
Very good. Oh, well, I just have one more question too. I got a million questions, but the last one is that on your street photography, most people shoot India, Nepal, and that in color, and you didn't. I really love the feel of the images and that. Was that an intentional thing, or are you shooting in color? You're converting. What was the story there?
I have to admit, I have both. So I got both. Color is great, but it's also difficult. I think color is very difficult to work well with digital, because in India and Nepal, there's a lot of noise. Like there's a lot of noise, and visual noise. So with black and white, you can find a little bit more structure, a little bit more patterns. You can just kind of exploit that side. I do have color images as well that I really like. And I think if I go through everything that I shot there, I might find enough to kind of be able to showcase them. But black and whites are easier to select. They're easier to pick. You know which one. It's easier to kind of find out which one is good and which one isn't, because they are very kind of easy to judge.
Yeah, they were cracking shots anyway. So congratulations on that. And I guess we're to wrap things up there. So on behalf of the AASPI, all AASPI members and the committee, I'd like to really thank you for your time tonight and presenting tonight. Love your street work as well. You're gonna have to come and exhibit with us, I think, when we have our showcase event. Anyway, so thank you very much. If you'd like to see more of Andrew's work, check out his Instagram feed at Rovenko or his website rovenko.com. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Andrew?
I just want to say massive thanks for the opportunity to share a bit more insight about what I did. And yeah, it's a real privilege to be heard by you guys. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, the series will continue next month, with the speaker series being scheduled for the second Tuesday of each month. Next month, we have a session with Betty Go, and that will be Tuesday, the 12th of April. So if you'd like to revisit this or any of the other speaker sessions in this series, so you can find them on our YouTube channel. If you don't know how to get there, I've made it easy for you with links on our website, aspi.com.au. So hope you've enjoyed tonight, and hope it serves some inspiration to get everyone back out on the streets with your camera. We have a few things on the horizon, and of course, we'll be having the call out for our annual exhibition at the Victorian Artists Society Gallery, so keep an eye on your inbox. That's about all for tonight. So thank you for joining us, and I hope to see you out on the street soon. All right, stay safe. See you next month.
Bye, guys.